If you've come to this lesson hoping to learn about modal auxiliary verbs, you've come to the right place. And this lesson is specifically about how to use modal auxiliary verbs to express politeness, permission, possibility, advice, and request. That's what this lesson is about. And we're going to be using the modal auxiliary verbs can, could, may, should, and would. You might be asking yourself, why? Why do I need to learn modal auxiliary verbs in English? It's because they're important in modifying the meaning of the main verb of a sentence. I'll give you an example. If I say something like, he goes, that's in the present simple tense, and it could mean something like habit. He goes every day. He goes once a week, or something like that. But if I want to make this verb all about ability and not just about doing something as a habit, and change it so that it means he is able to, I could say he can go. When you put the modal auxiliary verb can in the sentence, it changes the main verb so that in this case it doesn't mean something is a habit in the present tense. It just means that he has the ability to go. To start off this lesson, I'd like to make sure that you can pronounce all of these modal auxiliary verbs correctly. Try repeating each verb after me. I'll say each verb twice, leaving you time to practice pronouncing it. Repeat after me. Can. Can. Could. Could. May. May. Should. Should. Would. Would. There are some grammar rules that are common to all modal auxiliary verbs, and one of these is that they always appear first in a verb phrase within a sentence. And there has to be another verb there. That's why they're called modal auxiliary verbs. They're auxiliary to a main verb. Also, the main verb is in the infinitive form. That's not with the to in front of it, just the main verb. Instead of to go, it's just go. Here's an example. We would go to the party, but we're on vacation and away next week. In that sentence, would is the modal auxiliary verb. It appears first, and it's followed by go, the infinitive form of the verb go, the main verb. In a sentence that only has a modal auxiliary verb in it, it's probably just that the main verb is understood. It means that it was probably introduced before somewhere else in the conversation. Or it could also be that it's the answer to a question. In that case, you may see only the modal auxiliary verb in a sentence. To use a modal auxiliary verb in the past tense, you need to introduce the verb have, and it comes right after the modal auxiliary verb. You have the modal auxiliary verb first, then you have the verb have, and after that, you have the past participle form of the main verb. In a sentence like this, he should have gone there, you'll see that the subject comes first. Then there's the modal auxiliary verb should, followed by have, and then gone, the past participle form of the main verb. One exception is the modal auxiliary verb can. In the past tense, you don't say he can have gone there. You have to change can to could for the past tense. That sentence in the past would be, he could have gone there. Could, the modal auxiliary verb, past form of can, is followed by have, and then the past participle of the main verb. No S is required for the third person singular of a verb that's conjugated as a modal auxiliary verb. So if you want to say something like he should, you don't say he shoulds. It wouldn't be he shoulds have gone there. It's actually he should have gone there. There's no S added onto the modal auxiliary verb. And speaking of that, you also don't add the ed or ing endings to the modal auxiliary verb to put that verb or the whole verb phrase into a different tense. As an example, we don't say he could'd have been working for the government this summer. We don't add the ed to the modal auxiliary verb to make it past tense. That's handled by the main verb and the auxiliary. We say, he could have been working for the government this summer. For the negative form of a modal auxiliary verb sentence, you just need to introduce the word not right after the modal auxiliary verb. He should go there would become he should not go there, and that can be contracted to he shouldn't go there. The exception for this is may. For the modal auxiliary verb may, there is no form like mayn't in the negative. You have to say may not. So he may not go there is what you say. You don't say he mayn't. For yes-no questions, all you need to do is change the position of the subject and the modal auxiliary verb. For the sentence, he should go there, if you want to put that into a question form that can be answered with yes or no, you just take the should and put it at the front of the sentence before the subject, and it becomes, should he go there? Modal auxiliary verb first and the subject second. Modal auxiliary verbs can be used to say something or write something in a more polite way. You can also use modal auxiliary verbs to simplify a sentence. If you want to say something like, you are wrong, that's quite blunt, it's quite direct, and not really all that polite. But in English, we often soften that with a modal auxiliary verb like could. You could say something like, could you have made a mistake? And that just makes it more polite. You can also use modal auxiliary verbs to express something in a more simple way. As an example, if you have a sentence like this one, yesterday, when I had the chance to go to St. John, I wish I had taken the opportunity to go. A modal auxiliary verb can take care a lot of that by saying, yesterday, I should have gone to St. John. And in that case, the modal auxiliary verb actually gives you a sense of regret, that you wish you had have done something. The simple future, future continuous, future perfect, and future perfect continuous tenses all use the auxiliary verb will to construct these tenses. Will is also used for other purposes. One of them is as a modal auxiliary verb. Will can also make a sentence sound like something is certain, or a promise, or a request, or a bunch of things. It can just be confusing if you want to express a modal auxiliary verb thing using the word will. So you need to find a way to do it that doesn't use the auxiliary verb will. That's creating these future tenses and future continuous tenses. An example would be, she will visit next week if her car is repaired. If you want to change that to be a modal auxiliary verb type of sentence and modify it, you need to change the sentence and not use the auxiliary verb will. So you could say something like, she can visit if her car is repaired. Or she should be able to visit if her car is repaired. It's difficult to communicate in English without using modal auxiliary verbs. But luckily, it's actually quite easy to use them in the present simple tense, and they can also make it easier to say or write things sometimes. Check my podcasts for more lessons about modal auxiliary verbs. There are a lot of them, and they're very useful. Until next time.